The cold wind on Kepler 442c howled across the barren landscape, carrying dust that had been undisturbed for millions of years. Dr. Elena Martinez pulled her environmental suit tighter as she watched her team work around the massive excavation site. The structure they had uncovered was unlike anything she had seen in her 20 years of deep space archaeology. The building rose from the ground like a crystal flower, made of black stone. Its walls curved in impossible ways that hurt the eyes to follow. Strange symbols covered every surface, glowing faintly with their own inner light. Elena had studied alien ruins across 12 different star systems, but this place felt different. It felt alive. "Dr. Martinez, you need to see this," called out her assistant, Ben Clark. He was standing near what looked like the main entrance, holding his scanner with shaking hands. The readings on his device were jumping wildly. Elena walked over her, boots crunching on the crystalline ground. "What is it, Ben?" "The energy readings just spiked. Whatever power source this place has, it's still active after all these years." Ben wiped sweat from his forehead despite the freezing temperature. "The dating shows this structure is at least 4 million years old. Nothing should still be working after that long." Elena took the scanner and studied the numbers. Her heart began to race. If the power source was still functional, this could be the greatest archaeological discovery in human history. She pressed her communicator. "This is Martinez to the horizon. We need the full excavation team down here immediately." High above the moon's surface, the research vessel Horizon orbited in the dim light of the distant star. The ship was not built for combat or exploration. It was a floating laboratory filled with scientists, historians, and support crew. Captain Lisa Rodriguez ran a tight ship, but she gave her researchers the freedom they needed to do their work. In the maintenance bay, Jake Morrison was having a bad day. The plasma torch in his hand sputtered and died for the 3rd time in an hour. He cursed under his breath and set it down on his workbench. At 28 years old, Jake had been fixing things since he was a child. His father had taught him that every machine had a personality, and you had to listen to what it was trying to tell you. The torch was trying to tell him it was broken beyond repair. Jake had been working on ships for 10 years, ever since he dropped out of college. He was good with his hands and could fix almost anything, but he had never wanted to be more than a maintenance worker. Let the smart people worry about the big picture. He just wanted to keep the lights on and the air flowing. His communicator buzzed. "Morrison, we need you in Storage Bay 7. Some kind of sensor malfunction near the artifact storage." Jake sighed and picked up his toolkit. Storage Bay 7 was where they kept all the items Dr. Martinez and her team brought up from the surface. Most of it looked like fancy rocks to him, but the scientists got excited about every piece of ancient junk they found. The storage bay was larger than most rooms on the ship, with carefully controlled temperature and humidity. Rows of metal shelves held hundreds of artifacts, each one tagged and cataloged. The air felt thick and strange when Jake walked in. Like the moment before a thunderstorm, he found the malfunctioning sensor near the back of the bay. It was a simple device that monitored the artifacts for any changes in temperature or energy output. The readings on its display made no sense. According to the sensor, something in this section was putting out massive amounts of energy, but Jake could not see anything unusual. He opened his toolkit and began checking the sensor's connections. Everything looked normal. The device was only 2 months old and should not be having problems. Jake was about to call for a replacement when something caught his eye. On the shelf, directly in front of him, sat a black sphere about the size of a basketball. It looked like it was made of polished obsidian, perfectly smooth except for thin lines that covered its surface in complex patterns. Jake had seen it before when the first shipment came up from the surface, but he had not paid much attention. to it. Then now, the sphere seemed different. The lines on its surface appeared to be moving, shifting, and changing like living things. Jake blinked hard and looked again. The lines were definitely moving, forming new patterns even as he watched. Should have called Dr. Martinez immediately. He should have backed away and reported what he was seeing. Instead, Jake found himself stepping closer to the shelf. The sphere was beautiful in a way that made his chest tight. He had never seen anything so perfect. Without thinking, Jake reached out and touched the sphere with his bare hand. The world exploded into light. Jake felt electricity race up his arm and into his brain. Images flashed behind his eyes faster than he could process them. He saw vast cities floating in space, creatures that walked on 6 legs and had faces like flowers, machines that bent reality to their will. He saw a war that raged across the galaxy with weapons that could destroy entire star systems. Then he saw the end. He watched a proud and ancient race realize they had gone too far, that their quest for power had doomed not just themselves, but all life in the universe. In their final moments, they scattered their most precious artifacts across the galaxy, hoping that someday a younger and wiser species would find them. The vision stopped as suddenly as they had begun. Jake found himself on his knees in its thigh. Storage bay, his hand still touching the sphere. But the artifact had changed. What had been cold black stone was now warm and pulsing with soft blue light. The patterns on its surface had reorganized themselves into something that looked almost like text, though Jake could not read it. More shocking was what Jake felt in his mind. There was something else there now, a presence that was ancient and patient and incredibly sad. It spoke to him without words, sharing concepts and ideas that his brain should not have been able to understand. The sphere was not just an artifact. It was a library, a teacher, and a test all in one. The race that created it had been called the Architects, and they had ruled the galaxy when humans were still learning to make fire. They had achieved wonders beyond imagination, but power without wisdom had been their downfall. Jake understood that the sphere had been waiting. For millions of years, it had tested every species that found it, looking for one that could be trusted. With the knowledge it contained, most had failed the test. Some had been too primitive to understand what they had found. Others had been too aggressive, seeking only weapons and power. But something about Jake had been different. The sphere had seen into his heart and found what it was looking for. Not ambition or genius, but something simpler and more rare. It had found someone who fixed things instead of breaking them, someone who helped instead of taking. The sphere had chosen him. Jake tried to stand, but found his legs would not support him. The connection with the artifact was overwhelming, like trying to drink from a waterfall. Information poured into his mind faster than he could process it. He learned about energy sources that could power a planet, about ships that could cross the galaxy in the blink of an eye, about technologies that could heal any wound or cure any disease. He also learned about the responsibility that came with such knowledge. The Architects had failed because they had forgotten that power should serve life, not rule it. Their final gift to the universe was this test, a chance for another species to succeed where they had failed. Alarms began blaring throughout the ship. The energy release from the sphere's activation had overloaded sensors across the horizon. Jake could hear running footsteps in the corridor outside the storage bay. He looked at the sphere, still glowing softly in his hands, and realized his life had just changed forever. The first thing Captain Lisa Rodriguez noticed when she reached Storage Bay 7 was the smell. The air carried a strange metallic scent, like the moment after lightning strikes. Emergency lights flashed red throughout the corridor, and her crew was running in every direction, trying to figure out what had caused the power surge. She found Jake Morrison sitting on the floor, his back against a storage shelf. The maintenance worker looked dazed, like someone who had just woken up from a deep sleep. In his hands, he held a black sphere that pulsed with soft blue light. The patterns on its surface moved like living things, constantly shifting and changing. Morrison. What happened here? Captain Rodriguez knelt beside him, checking his vital signs with her medical scanner. His heart rate was elevated but stable. His brain activity, however, was off the charts. Jake looked at her with eyes that seemed different. Somehow, they held a depth that had not been there before, as if he had seen things no human was meant to see. I touched it, he said simply, and it chose me. Before the captain could ask what he meant, Dr. Elena Martinez burst into the storage bay with half her research team behind her. She took one look at the glowing sphere in Jake's hands, and her face went pale. My God, she whispered, it's active. After 4 million years, it's actually active. Jake slowly got to his feet, still holding the sphere. The artifact seemed to weigh nothing in his hands, despite being the size of a basketball. It's not just active, Doctor. It's alive. Not alive like an animal, but alive like a computer that thinks and feels. Dr. Martinez stared at him. She had worked with Jake for 6 months during this expedition. He was a good worker, reliable and honest, but he had never shown any interest in their discoveries. Now he was speaking about the artifact like he understood. It on a level she could only dream of. Jake, I need you to tell me exactly what happened, she said carefully. Jake closed his eyes for a moment, and when he opened them, they glowed faintly with the same blue light as the sphere. The architects made this. They were an ancient race that ruled the galaxy long before humans existed. They became so powerful that they could reshape reality itself, but power corrupted them. In the end, they destroyed themselves and nearly took the entire universe with them. The words came out of Jake's mouth, but they did not sound like him. The vocabulary was too advanced, the concepts too complex. Dr. Martinez felt a chill run down her spine. Before they died, Jake continued, the architects created 5 spheres like this one. Each sphere contains all their knowledge and technology. They scattered them across the galaxy, hoping that someday a worthy species would find them. The spheres were programmed to choose a guardian, someone who could be trusted with such power. Captain Rodriguez stepped forward. Jake, you're talking about things that should be impossible. How do you know all this? Jake held up the sphere, and its light grew brighter. Because it told me. The sphere has been testing every species that found it for millions of years. Most failed the test. Some were too primitive to understand what they had found. Others were too violent, caring only about weapons and conquest. But humans are different. We have the right balance of intelligence and compassion. Suddenly, the lights in the storage bay flickered and changed. Holographic displays materialized in the air around Jake, showing star charts and technical diagrams that looked nothing like human technology. As symbols and numbers meant nothing to the others, but Jake studied them as if he had been reading them his whole life. The sphere is uploading its knowledge to me, he said, his voice filled with wonder. I can see how to build engines that travel faster than light, how to create energy from nothing, how to heal any disease. The architects discovered the secrets of the universe itself. Dr. Martinez tried to process what she was seeing. The maintenance worker who had struggled to fix a simple plasma torch was now displaying an understanding of physics that surpassed anything in human science. Jake, this is incredible, but we need to be careful. We don't understand what this artifact might be doing to your mind. Before Jake could respond, alarms began blaring throughout the ship. This time, they were not power surge warnings. These were the alarms that meant hostile ships had been detected. Captain Rodriguez pressed her communicator. Bridge, report. Captain, we have multiple contacts dropping out of hyperspace, came the reply from her first officer. 27 ships. Configuration unknown. They're not responding to our hails. Jake's eyes went wide, and the sphere in his hands pulsed faster. "They felt it," he said urgently. When the sphere activated, it sent out a signal across the galaxy. The Keffer Empire has been searching for architect relics for centuries. Now they know we have one. Who are the Keffer? Captain Rodriguez demanded. Images flashed on the holographic displays around Jake. They showed tall, reptilian creatures with 4 arms and faces like angry lizards. Their ships were dark and angular, built for war rather than exploration. They're a militant species that believes power gives them the right to rule over others. They have 3 architect spheres, but none of them ever activated. The spheres rejected them as unworthy. Dr. Martinez felt sick to her stomach. And now they're coming for ours. The ship shuddered as something struck the hull. Captain Rodriguez grabbed her communicator again. "All hands, this is the captain. We are under attack by unknown hostiles. All non-essential personnel report to emergency stations." Jake stood up straighter, and the sphere began to glow brighter. "Captain, I can help. The sphere is showing me things, technologies we can use to defend ourselves." "Jake, you're a maintenance worker, not a weapons expert," Dr. Martinez protested. "I was a maintenance worker," Jake corrected. "Now I'm something else. The sphere chose me to be its guardian, to protect the knowledge of the architects from those who would misuse it." More impacts shook the ship. Through the viewports, they could see the dark shapes of Keffer vessels surrounding the horizon. The research ship was not built for combat. Its shields were weak, and it had no weapons beyond basic defensive systems. Jake closed his eyes and placed both hands on the sphere. The artifact's light spread through his body, making his skin glow, like he was lit from within. When he opened his eyes, they burned with blue fire. "The Keffer are demanding we surrender the sphere," he said, somehow knowing this without being told. "They're threatening to destroy the ship if we refuse. But they don't understand what they're dealing with." The holographic displays around Jake changed, showing the internal systems of the horizon. Lines of blue energy began to trace through the ship's structure on the display, like blood vessels carrying light instead of blood. "Jake, what are you doing?" Captain Rodriguez asked. "The sphere can interface with our technology," Jake explained, his voice growing stronger and more confident. "The architects designed their tools to work with any sufficiently advanced civilization. I can upgrade our systems, make them better than anything the Keffer have." Dr. Martinez watched in amazement as the maintenance worker she thought she knew transformed before her eyes. Jake Morrison was becoming something new, something humanity had never seen before. He was becoming the bridge between human technology and the wisdom of an ancient race. The question was whether that transformation would be enough to save them all. The ship shook again, harder this time. Through the sphere, Jake could feel the Keffer ships positioning themselves for a final assault. They had waited too long to act. Now he would have to learn to use his new abilities in the middle of a battle, with the lives of everyone on the horizon depending on his success. Jake took a deep breath and began to work. The real test was just beginning. Jake pressed his hands against the sphere and felt its knowledge flow into him like water through a broken dam. The visions came faster now, showing him the rise and fall of the architects in terrible detail. He saw their great cities spanning, entire star systems, their fleets of ships that could reshape matter with a thought. He also saw their final war, when brother fought brother across the galaxy until reality itself began to crack under the strain. The horizon shuddered as another Keffer weapon struck the hull. Captain Rodriguez was shouting orders over the ship's communication system, but Jake barely heard her. His mind was filled with the memories of a dead race, learning lessons written in the ashes of 1,000,000,000 worlds. "They made the same mistakes we're making right now," Jake said, his voice strange and distant. The blue light from the sphere had spread through his entire body, making him look like a living constellation. The architects thought their technology made them gods. They forgot that power without wisdom leads only to destruction. Dr. Martinez grabbed his arm. "Jake, we need you to focus. Can the sphere help us fight these ships or not?" Jake looked at her with eyes that held 4 million years of sorrow. "It can, but that's exactly what destroyed the architects. Every time they faced a threat, they built bigger weapons. In the end, they had weapons that could unmake the laws of physics themselves. When they used them, they nearly destroyed all existence." Another impact, stronger than the others, sent everyone stumbling. Emergency lights flickered throughout the storage bay as the ship's power grid struggled to maintain the shields. "Captain," came a voice over the communicator. "They, Kethver, are broadcasting a message. They're giving us one more chance to surrender the artifact before they destroy the ship." Jake closed his eyes and reached out with senses he had not possessed an hour ago. Through the sphere's connection, he could feel the Kethver ships surrounding them, 27 vessels, each one bristling with weapons that could reduce the horizon to scrap metal in seconds. Their crews were filled with anger and frustration that had been building for centuries. "They've been searching for relics for over 1,000 years, Jake said softly. "They found 3 spheres, but none of them would activate. The Kethver believe that power is the only thing that matters in the universe. They enslave weaker species and destroy anyone who opposes them. That's why the spheres rejected them. And now they want ours," Captain Rodriguez said grimly. Jake nodded. "They think if they can claim all 5 spheres, they can force them to work. They don't understand that the architects built safeguards into their technology. The spheres will only function for those who prove themselves worthy." The holographic displays around Jake suddenly changed, showing him something that made his heart race. Far beyond the Kethver fleet, more ships were approaching. These vessels were even larger and more heavily armed than the ones already surrounding them. "War Marshal Decarown is coming," Jake said, reading the information flowing through the sphere. "He commands the Kethver Third Fleet, over 200 ships, including their most powerful dreadnoughts. He's obsessed with finding architect technology." Dr. Martinez stared at the displays. 200 ships? We have to surrender. We can't fight that many vessels. Jake stood up slowly, still holding the glowing sphere. "No, we can't surrender. If the Kethver get this sphere, they'll use its knowledge to build weapons that make their current arsenal look like toys. They'll enslave every species in the galaxy, including humanity." "Then what do you suggest?" Captain Rodriguez demanded. Jake looked at the sphere in his hands and felt the weight of an impossible choice. The architects had faced the same decision in their final days. They could use their ultimate weapons to destroy their enemies, but doing so would tear apart the fabric of reality. They had chosen destruction, and their civilization had paid the price. "The sphere is offering me access to weapons that could destroy the entire Kethver fleet in an instant," Jake said quietly. "The same weapons that ended the architect civilization. It's testing me, just like it tested them." The ship shook again, and this time they heard the screech of metal being torn apart. The Kethver were targeting the ship's engines, trying to disable it without destroying the precious artifact on board. "Jake, we're running out of time," Dr. Martinez urged. Jake pressed his forehead against the sphere and dove deeper into its memory banks. He saw the moment when the last architect ruler had stood in a room much like this one, holding a weapon that could destroy galaxies. The alien had made his choice in anger and desperation, and the universe had nearly ended because of it. But there had to be another way. The architects had been brilliant, but they had also been proud and stubborn. They had seen only 2 options: surrender or complete destruction. Humans, Jake realized, were different. They were better at finding the third option, the solution, that no one else could see. "Captain, I need you to open a communication channel to the Kethver fleet," Jake said suddenly. "What? Jake, they're not interested in talking. They want the sphere." "Trust me," Jake said, and something in his voice made Captain Rodriguez nod and reach for her communicator. "This is Captain Rodriguez of the research vessel Horizon. We're opening a channel to the Kethver fleet." The main screen in the storage bay flickered to life, showing the bridge of the lead Kethver ship. The creature on the screen was tall and reptilian, with forearms and scales that looked like black metal. His eyes burned with a hatred that had been building for centuries. "I am Commander Zeke-Tar of the Kethver Empire," the alien said in accented, but understandable English. "You will surrender the Architect Relic immediately, or we will destroy your vessel and take it from your wreckage." Jake stepped forward, still holding the glowing sphere. "I am Jake Morrison, chosen guardian of this Architect Relic, and I challenge you to single combat for the right to possess it." The alien commander's eyes widened in surprise. Dr. Martinez grabbed Jake's arm. "Are you insane? You can't fight one of them." But Jake had seen something in the sphere's memories. The Kethver had an ancient code of honor that they rarely used anymore, but it was still part of their law. A challenge for single combat could not be refused, especially when it involved something as important as an Architect Relic. Commander Zeke-Tar leaned forward on the screen. "You would face me in combat, human? You are barely more than an insect." "I wold," Jake said calmly. "Unless, of course, the mighty Kethver Empire is afraid of one human with a maintenance worker's training." The insult hit home. Jake could see the rage building in the alien commander's face. "Very well, human. I accept your challenge. We will dock with your vessel, and you will face me in the traditional manner. When I defeat you, the relic will belong to the Empire. And if I win," Jake said, "you and your fleet leave this system and never return." "Agreed," Commander Zeke-Tar snarled. "Prepare to die, Guardian." The screen went dark. Captain Rodriguez stared at Jake in horror. "Do you have any idea what you just did? Kethver warriors are twice as strong as humans and trained from birth to fight." Jake looked down at the sphere in his hands. It was showing him something new now, something that filled him with both hope and terror. The architects didn't just leave behind weapons and technology, Captain. They left behind the memory of every mistake they ever made. And I just found a way to avoid repeating the biggest one. The fate of the galaxy now rested on a single combat between a maintenance worker and an alien warrior. Jake only hoped he was making the right choice. The docking bay of the Horizon filled with the sound of metal grinding against metal as the Kethver shuttle attached itself to the research vessel. Jake stood in the center of the bay, the glowing sphere hovering just above his right shoulder without any visible support. The artifact had begun to change him in ways he was only beginning to understand. Captain Rodriguez watched from behind a protective barrier with Dr. Martinez and half the ship's crew. She had tried to talk Jake out of this madness, but the maintenance worker had become something else entirely. The blue light from the sphere had seeped into his skin, and his eyes now glowed with an inner fire that seemed to see through everything. "I still think this is suicide," Dr. Martinez whispered to the captain. "Commander Zeke-Tar is a career soldier. Jake fixes pipes and electrical systems." "Jake isn't just Jake anymore," Captain Rodriguez replied quietly. "Look at him. Whatever that sphere did to him, he's not the same person who walked into Storage Bay 7 this morning." The airlock hissed open, and Commander Zeke-Tar stepped into the docking bay. The Kethver warrior was even more intimidating in person than he had been on the screen. Nearly 8 feet tall, his body was covered in natural armor that looked like black scales. His forearms ended in claws that could tear through steel, and his reptilian face showed nothing but contempt for the humans watching him. Behind him came two other Kethver, carrying what looked like weapons. But Jake knew from the sphere's knowledge that these were the traditional tools for single combat. A pair of energy blades that would cut through almost anything, and personal shield generators that would protect the fighters from fatal wounds, while still allowing for a decisive victory. "So," Commander Zektar said, his voice like grinding stone, "this is the human who dares to challenge the might of the Kethver Empire. You are smaller than I expected, Guardian." Jake looked up at a towering alien and felt no fear. The sphere was showing him things, possibilities, and outcomes that shifted like water. He could see the paths that led to victory and the ones that led to destruction. More importantly, he could see the choice that the architects had never been able to make. "Size doesn't matter as much as wisdom," Jake said calmly. "Your people have been searching for architect relics for 1,000 years. Tell me, Commander, what would you do if you possessed all 5 spheres?" Zektar's eyes blazed with hunger. "We would use their power to bring order to the galaxy. Every species would know their place. The strong would rule, and the weak would serve. It is the natural way." "That's exactly what the architects thought," Jake replied, "and it destroyed them." One of the Kethver soldiers stepped forward and placed the combat equipment on the floor between Jake and their commander. The energy blades hummed with power, and the shield generators cast a faint shimmer in the air around them. "Enough talk," Zektar growled. "Let us settle this the traditional way." Jake picked up one of the energy blades and felt its weight in his hand. The weapon was heavier than he expected, designed for the superior strength of Kethver warriors. But as he gripped it, the sphere's knowledge flowed through him. He understood the blade's construction, its weaknesses, and how to use it most effectively. "The rules are simple," Zektar announced to the watching crowd. "First blood wins. The loser surrenders all claim to the architect relic." Jake activated his shield generator and felt the protective field surround his body. "I understand. But I want you to know something before we begin, Commander. Win or lose, this fight is going to change everything." Zektar laughed, a sound like rocks falling down a mountain. "The only thing that will change is your species' place in the galaxy. After I claim the relic, humanity will learn to serve the Empire like all the other inferior races." Jake raised his energy blade and fell into a fighting stance that the sphere had pulled from the memories of 100 different warrior cultures. "We'll see about that." The Kethver commander attacked with the speed and fury of a natural predator. His 4 arms moved independently, 2 wielding energy blades, while the other 2 tried to grab and crush his opponent. Jake barely managed to dodge the first strike, feeling the heat from Zektar's blade as it passed inches from his face. Jake had advantages that the alien warrior could not understand. The sphere was not just giving him knowledge, it was processing information faster than any organic brain could function. Jake could see each attack coming a split second before it happened, like watching a film in slow motion. More importantly, the sphere was teaching him about his opponent. Every move Zektar made revealed something about Kethver fighting techniques, their strengths, and their blind spots. Jake began to see the patterns in the aliens' attacks, the habits that came from centuries of fighting enemies who were either much weaker or fought in predictable ways. Jake realized were different. They adapted, they improvised. They found solutions that no one else would think of. Jake ducked under a sweeping blade strike and spun away from Zektar's grasping claws. The alien commander was faster and stronger, but Jake was learning with every second that passed. The sphere showed him how to use the Kethver size against him, how to turn the warrior's aggressive nature into a weakness. "Stand still and fight." Zektar roared in frustration as Jake continued to dodge and weave around his attacks. I am fighting, Jake replied, sliding between the alien's legs and scoring a shallow cut on Zektar's armor. You're just not used. To opponents who think. The crowd of watching humans gasped as Jake's blade found its mark. It was not enough to draw blood, but it proved that the alien commander was not invincible. More importantly, it showed Zektar that his human opponent was far more dangerous than he had assumed. The HFY warrior's attacks became more desperate and wild. He began making mistakes, leaving openings that Jake was quick to exploit. But Jake did not press his advantage for a killing blow. Instead, he continued to learn, continued to adapt, waiting for the right moment. That moment came when Zektar overextended himself in a furious charge. Jake stepped aside at the last second and brought his blade up in a precise strike that sliced through the alien's natural armor and drew a line of purple blood across his chest. The docking bay fell silent. Zektar looked down at the wound in shock, then at Jake, who stood calmly a few feet away. Impossible, the alien commander whispered. You are just a maintenance worker. How did you defeat me? Jake deactivated his energy blade and let it fall to the floor. Because I learned something the architects never did. True strength doesn't come from having the biggest weapons or the most advanced technology. It comes from knowing when not to use them. A sphere floating beside Jake pulsed brighter, and suddenly the air around them filled with holographic images. They showed the final battle of the Architect's Civil War, when both sides had unleashed weapons that could destroy reality itself. The Watchers saw planets being unmade, stars going out, and the very laws of physics breaking down under the assault. This is what happens when power becomes more important than wisdom, Jake said, his voice carrying throughout the docking bay. The architects had the strength to remake the universe, but they lacked the wisdom to know they shouldn't. Zektar stared at the images, his reptilian face showing an emotion his people rarely displayed: fear. The legends spoke of such weapons, but we thought they were myths. They're real, Jake confirmed. And the sphere is offering them to me right now. I could use them to destroy your entire fleet in the time it takes to blink. But that would make me just like the architects. It would make me just like you. The HFY commander slowly removed his shield generator and placed his weapons on the ground. I acknowledge defeat, human guardian. The relic is yours by right of combat. Jake nodded and walked over to help Zektar to his feet. The relic was never mine to begin with, Commander. I'm just its protector, and my first act as guardian is to offer you a choice. Zektar looked confused. What choice? Your people can continue down the path of conquest and domination, using force to take what you want until you destroy yourselves, like the architects did. Or you can choose a different way. You can learn to build instead of tear down, to protect instead of conquer. The alien commander stared at Jake for a long moment. And if we choose this different path, then maybe someday your people will be worthy of the architect's legacy too. 3 days after the combat in the docking bay, Jake stood on the observation deck of the horizon and watched the HFY fleet preparing to leave the system. Commander Zektar had kept his word. The 27 warships that had come to claim the architect Relic were now departing in peace, but not all of them were going back to the Empire. 7 of the HFY vessels had chosen to remain behind. Their crews had listened to Zektar's account of the battle and the visions the sphere had shown them. They had seen what happened when a civilization chose power over wisdom, and they wanted no part of repeating that mistake. It's remarkable, Dr. Martinez said, joining Jake at the viewport. In 3 days, you've managed to split the HFY fleet and convince them to question everything they've believed for centuries. Jake touched the sphere that floated beside his shoulder. It had become a permanent part of him now, connected to his nervous system in ways that human science was only beginning to understand. I didn't convince them of anything. They convinced themselves. Sometimes people just need to see the truth clearly. Captain Rodriguez approached them, carrying a datapad filled with reports from across human space. The news of the architect. Relic's discovery had spread quickly, and the reaction had been everything from excitement to terror. Earth wants you to return immediately, she told Jake. The Science Council is demanding full access to the sphere's knowledge. The military wants to study its defensive capabilities. And the politicians want to figure out how to use it for leverage against other species. Jake sighed and shook his head. They don't understand. This isn't something you use for political advantage. The sphere contains the history of a race that destroyed itself because they thought power was more important than responsibility. Try explaining that to Admiral Hayes, Captain Rodriguez said. He's already talking about building a fleet of ships equipped with architect technology. He thinks it will make humanity the dominant force in the galaxy. Then Admiral Hayes needs to learn the same lesson the Kethver are learning, Jake replied. The sphere will only share its knowledge with those who prove they can handle it responsibly. If humanity tries to use it for conquest, it will shut down just like it did for the Kethver Empire. Dr. Martinez looked at the sphere with a mixture of awe and concern. Jake, what exactly are your plans now? You can't just wander around the galaxy with the most powerful artifact in known history. Jake had been thinking about that question for the past 3 days. The sphere had shown him the locations of the other 4 relics, scattered across the galaxy on worlds that had been waiting for millions of years. It had also shown him something else, the responsibility that came with being their guardian. The architects made one final gift before they died, Jake said quietly. They didn't just scatter their relics randomly. They placed them where they would do the most good, where they could help younger civilizations avoid making the same mistakes. He gestured toward the viewport where the remaining Kethver ships were establishing a defensive perimeter around the research vessel. Commander Zektar and his followers want to learn a different way of living. The sphere can teach them, but only if I'm there to guide the process. You're planning to go with them? Captain Rodriguez asked in surprise. Not just with them. Jake explained. The sphere is showing me dozens of species across the galaxy who are at critical points in their development. Some are on the verge of discovering faster-than-light travel. Others are developing artificial intelligence. All of them are facing the same choice the architects faced, whether to use their new power wisely or let it destroy them. Dr. Martinez nodded slowly. And you think you can help them make the right choice? I think I have to try, Jake said. The sphere chose me not because I'm special, but because I'm ordinary. I'm just a maintenance worker who learned that fixing things is better than breaking them. That's exactly the kind of perspective these civilizations need. A chime from the ship's communication system interrupted their conversation. The main screen in the observation lounge activated, showing the bridge of one of the Kethver vessels. Commander Zektar appeared on screen, but he looked different than he had during their combat. The rage and hunger that had burned in his eyes were gone, replaced by something that might have been hope. Guardian Morrison, the alien commander, said formally, "My officers have been studying the historical records you shared with us. We have voted to officially withdraw from the Kethver Empire and establish a new colony dedicated to peaceful development." Jake smiled. That's a good start, Commander. Where are you planning to establish this colony? The sphere has shown us a world in the Vega system that would suit our needs, Zektar replied. It has the resources we need to build a new kind of society. But we will need guidance to avoid repeating the mistakes of our past. You'll have it, Jake promised. The sphere contains the wisdom of countless civilizations that faced similar challenges. We can learn from both their successes and their failures. Captain Rodriguez stepped forward. Jake, if you're really planning to leave with them, the Horizon can't provide support. We're a research vessel, not a diplomatic mission. I know, Jake said. But the sphere can upgrade any ship to travel safely across the galaxy. The HFY vessels will become something new, ships designed for exploration and assistance rather than conquest. Over the next several hours, Jake worked with the sphere to begin the transformation of the HFY fleet. The ancient artifact interfaced with their technology in ways that seemed impossible, upgrading their engines, shields, and computer systems. More importantly, it began to change the way the ship's crews thought about their purpose. The HFY had been warriors for so long that they had forgotten they could be anything else. But the sphere showed them new possibilities: scientists, teachers, healers, builders. Slowly, the alien warriors began to see themselves not as conquerors, but as protectors. Dr. Martinez watched the transformation with fascination. This is incredible, Jake. You're not just changing their technology, you're changing their entire culture. The architects learned too late that technology without wisdom is useless, Jake explained. But they also learned that wisdom without compassion is just another form of tyranny. The sphere isn't just a repository of knowledge. It's a guide that helps civilizations find their better nature. As the final preparations were made for departure, Jake stood once more on the observation deck of the Horizon. In a few hours, he would transfer to one of the transformed HFY vessels and begin a journey that would take him across the galaxy. He would seek out the other architect relics and the civilizations that might prove worthy of their gifts. Captain Rodriguez joined him for a final conversation. Are you sure about this, Jake? Once you leave, there's no telling when you'll see Earth again. Jake looked at the sphere floating beside him, its blue light pulsing gently like a heartbeat. The architects spent millions of years building an empire that spanned the galaxy. In the end, it all came to nothing because they forgot what really mattered. They forgot that the purpose of power is to protect and nurture life, not to control it. He turned to face the captain. Humanity is young, Captain Rodriguez. We're just starting to discover what we're capable of. The choices we make in the next few centuries will determine whether we become like the architects or something better. And you think you can influence those choices? Jake smiled. I think I can help humanity remember what we've always known, that our greatest strength isn't our technology or our weapons. It's our ability to care about each other, even when we have every reason not to. The sphere pulsed brighter, and Jake felt its approval. Somewhere across the galaxy, other relics were waiting. Other civilizations were approaching their moment of choice. And now they would have a guide, a simple maintenance worker who had learned that the most important thing you could do with unlimited power was choose not to use it. The age of the architects was over. The age of the guardians had begun.